now on this show. We're now joined by Josh Neighbor. 365 Sports has his own, of course, podcast, College Football, the Big 12. Josh, we just had Coach Aranda on, but let's focus in on the conference and the championship game. Your thoughts about the matchup between Texas, Oklahoma State tomorrow morning in Arlington.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Yes, and it's a great interview with Aranda. That was awesome. So I think for tomorrow, tough sledding is kind of the term I guess I would think of for Oklahoma State. If you think about what Oklahoma State does well, that's run the ball. Texas, what do they do great? They stop the run. And so that is where the challenge will be tomorrow for Oklahoma State, right? Not many people have run the ball very well against Texas this year. Dylan Gabriel's the one, but it was, a lot of scrambling, a lot of him making plays. So I'm not really sure Oklahoma State can line it up and run it right at Texas. Texas does struggle with the secondary, obviously. It's not a position they've been fantastic with. And Ryan Watts has been banged up. I know it sounds like he's going to play. So that's an area where I think they could take advantage. They've got the receiving core. It's got enough talent. But it just feels like to me that Oklahoma State's defense, too, is a problem. It's not a very good defense when it comes to stopping the pass. And Texas, Steve Sarkisian is very good at distributing the football. Just the one that gives me pause, though, is that after the really terrible start this year for Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy has proven once again why he's the best coach in this league. And the performance this year by Oklahoma State, what I think is, I'm not really sure where I'd put them talent-wise, top to bottom with their roster. I don't think it's as deficient of talent as we thought maybe at the start of the year. But where they are talent-wise in the Big 12 and where they've ended up is very impressive. But I think it's hard not to lean Longhorns tomorrow. Although I do think if you're giving Mike Gundy in a championship game, a little bit over 2 touchdowns, I'm probably going to take that just because as an underdog, his record is really good.
What has to happen for them to jump out and make this a game where they can trade scores with Texas and not have to play from behind again?
Yeah, so that's obviously their big question is, do you want to be in a game where you're trading scores? Because if it's a trading scores type situation, Texas is going to beat you. What they need to do is they need to be there early, obviously, and to keep themselves within striking distance. And in a kind of, line them up and see how it goes type fight, Texas will win. But the one thing Texas has been doing has caught them in recent games, you could say in recent years. But we've mentioned that Kansas State game, one that they were the much better team in, but 2 crippling turnovers on their side of the field set them back. Oklahoma State's going to need to force those or end up on the right side of those and also cash in. Those can't be 3. They've got to be 6. And it's got to be 6 basically every time that it happens, I think, for them to win the game outright. So Texas does make some mistakes, right? But you need to make sure that you turn whatever mistakes they make into points in a pretty significant way. And then the other big key here is this. You need to make sure that their red zone offense looks like their red zone offense for most of the year. The one area where Texas really struggles is the red zone on offense. And they hit a lot of explosive plays. They're very good with that. But if that's not the case, they got a whole lot of 3s. So you need to make sure when they turn it over, you're getting 6. When they get in the red zone, make sure they're getting 3. And I think you've got a fighting chance to win the game.
Josh, elsewhere around the Big 12, Dave Aranda is obviously staying on, so that leaves Dana Holgorsen as the only big head coaching change. Obviously, Kansas with a big OC change as of yesterday as well that will be interesting to watch. But what were your thoughts on Houston deciding to pivot? And also looks like it's coming down to Willie Fritz as being the favorite, if not Jeff Traylor. And I know there's other names, but sure seems to be a lot of smoke surrounding Willie Fritz. What do you think about that potential fit for the Cougs?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that they would wait this long. Obviously, Tulane's got the AAC championship game tomorrow, so it does make some sense that they'd wait. But we've been talking about Willie Fritz for jobs for a while now. That's been obviously a huge talking point. And he's 63 years old. So this is probably the last stop for a guy like a Willie Fritz. And it's interesting that they're going to go with a guy, Willie Fritz, that is coached this part of the country. He has been in Texas before, but he's kind of been in the area, I guess, because kind of the Southwest, like the Texas footprint-ish Midwest. So he's kind of got the Big 12 area covered. I'm really surprised, though. Maybe it's that buyout in the end that scared them with Jeff Traylor. I know there's some talk about that, but if you're buying Dana out for whatever that amount was, I have to figure that you're willing to put the money, into getting another coach. And to me, I don't know why you wouldn't go the Traylor direction. Like, you've got Houston, which is attractive for the same reasons to me that a UCF is attractive. It is in a talent-rich state, obviously, and you are in a spot where a lot of guys from your area will go elsewhere, right? So if those things don't work out, maybe they want to come back to the Missouri City area, the Houston area, whatever, and come back and be home. Also, large media market, all of those things. They have those advantages. I think the commuter school part of it hurts them a little bit. But once again, guys, Jeff Traylor was a coach where? UTSA. And last time I checked, San Antonio is a large city. So I feel like it's kind of a more natural fit with that. But Willie Fritz coaches, Tulane, which is in New Orleans, right? So there is that too. But yeah, it's just kind of, I guess the age thing scares me because I feel like the one thing you just went from was Dana's not super old, but like, you look at him, it's not like when he walks in the door, you're like, look at this spring chicken. No offense to Dana.
He's a little haggard.
But, yeah, a little, yeah, knackered, but yes, exactly. So maybe you want, and Jeff Traylor's not young either, but like Willie Fritz is 63. He's a good coach. I'm not positive it's a fit, but they are familiar with him because he was in the conference, in the AAC when they were together.
I think Dana Holgerson looks pretty good.
I mean,
being at all the pressures of, even though the millions of dollars, but the Red Bulls, who was the other one that drank a bunch of Red Bulls besides Holgerson? We know Matt Rule drank Monsters. Who was the other coach that just fed Red Bulls? Was it Chad Morris? Can't remember who.
That would not shock me.
Yeah. Josh, what do you think about Baylor's hiring of Jake Spavital as the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, so I think that's the right kind of hire. A guy who's 38 had you all with the interview, mentioning like the fact that hey, he can be in some of the meetings because he's been a head coach before, maybe helping out with the portal side of things. I also think schematically, Dave brought up a pretty good point where their personnel, they had a cow, might not necessarily match the offense, but it still worked. And you can tell at Aranda's core, like, he wants to run the ball. I mean, really, at least that was my thought. Like, you can hire Spavital, but he really, it seems like to me, guys, he wants to run the football. And that's the thing is they've had personnel and running backs who could do that. It's just kind of been a big key for them as to how the offensive line and tight ends have been able to acquit themselves. Because I actually think the receiving core and some of the talent they've got in those areas, pass catching, like, I feel like they can get guys. I feel like they're in a state where they can still get guys. I don't know if that'll end up being their issue. I just feel like up front, like, that's a huge challenge for them and kind of finding some consistency with that. I think they just wanted to find more consistency on offense, and I think maybe changing the identity, handing over the reins a bit, just changing something up was big. And I also like the fact that he's talking to Blake Shapen. And so, because, it's crazy, strange guys. I thought about this, we were thinking about it. Will Howard and Blake Shapen, those are the last two Big 12 championship winning quarterbacks, and they're both in the look. If they can get Shapen back, I think he's a really good player still. I think obviously struggled this year with injuries and whatnot, but I still think having a guy who's been around that long is actually good for the program, and also somebody who's with the high moments as of late is good. So maybe he can retain, but I think he will be able to find a quarterback. So I do like the hire, and I do think for them it's kind of the right decision. I mean, for Spavital, it's a good spot for him to kind of, in a state where things went wrong as a head coach, kind of rectify things as an OC maybe. And for Aranda, it's a nice little reset, I believe.
What do you think about Kansas losing Andy Kotelnicki to Penn State and the effect that could have on that offense? I mean, Lance Leipold's going to be fine football X's and O's wise, but man, he was a big part of what they did, especially when they were cooking there with Jalen Daniels. Yeah,
I don't know if there's I'm not sure if I have the words to do it, guys. I mean, they did some mean, nasty stuff. That offense was absolutely nasty. I mean, a lot of those concepts, Jason Bean was involved in plays. I think about all the time that the 2-point conversion, the last one they ran against Arkansas last year, it was the Daniels handoff to Bean. And I think they even ran that with Cole Ballard at one point too, when Bean was the quarterback. They have just so many cool run concepts. And their game management was really good too. And so I love Anecdotal Mickey. I love the way they generate that offense. I think that's the thing. Like whoever they're promoting, I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. It was a quarterback coach off. I forget who it was, but like the creativity for them was such a. I mean, there's just not many guys who are that creative. Now this week is the Broyles Award finalist, and I know Kansas won 8 games, whatever. I think whoever votes for that, like we need to stop looking at the top, like top taking the top coaches and top teams. We just have to stop doing that. We can't just say like God love Mike Bobo, but I've watched a lot of really average and below average Mike Bobo offenses, and Georgia's was awesome this year, but it should have been awesome. Guys like Andy Kotelnicki deserve a lot of credit because if you look at their losses outside of Texas, they were close games with a third string quarterback playing most of the time. And that's because the scheme was so good and they put their playmakers in good positions. And when it was Cole Ballard, they run a lot of wildcat with Devin Neal. Like he just he would even use guys like Jared Casey really well. And so I trust Lance Leipold. I mean, I think before it's all said and done, guys, if Lance Leipold continues on this trajectory, Andy Kotelnicki will not be the last assistant that he has leave and go off somewhere else. So I think that's the one thing they're going to miss is I don't know if the rest of the staff can be as creative. Now, he left them a pretty good, a cornucopia of plays, if you will, but they just kind of the creativity on a game-to-game basis was always a delight, in my opinion.
Josh, Will Howard is in the portal. What do you think is a good match for him? I mean, it's the Avery Johnson era now at Kansas State. I mean, we saw enough of him to know that, one of those guys was going to have to leave this year, and it's not going to be the young guy, right? If you're Chris Kleiman.
Yeah.
So Will Howard has had a good couple of years, including a conference title. Where do you see him fitting in?
Well, I think for Kansas State, like this is more of a identity and personnel choice. And I also think for Will Howard, this is a, NFL choice because the one thing you notice with K-State's offense is they want to be a varied rushing attack, I think, first. And Will Howard can run, but the receivers were not very good at getting open. And so and they had some struggles running on the rock this year too. So I think for them, Colin Klein was more of he was Will Howard's size, but I think, more of honestly, more of a Kansas rushing attack would work for them. You've got a potential stud in Avery Johnson. I think putting all of your time, energy, and resources into that is smart. And for Will Howard, I mean, honestly, guys, take your pick. I mean, he's a really good quarterback, and he is, he's mobile, he's big, he's got a big arm, obviously. We've seen him spread it all over the field. I think there's a lot of top 10 schools that are losing quarterbacks, and you could do a lot worse than Will Howard at quarterback. I mean, think about Bo Nix, right? Like we didn't think about Bo Nix as a great guy until he went up to the Northwest and, he's teamed up with the guys up there, and they've done a great job. Will Stein has done a fantastic job with that offense and, making Bo Nix look great. And Will Howard kind of has some similar physical traits to Bo Nix. I would say Washington too, right? Will Howard kind of fits, with what they do there, the passing the football as well. So I think there's plenty of options for him. Different places for him to go. And honestly, I think there's a lot of places where the list is a lot longer about where he does not fit compared to where he does fit.
Josh, if Texas wins tomorrow, do they find themselves in the college football playoff, in your opinion?
Well, it's gonna depend on if Paul had a good evening or not. I think that's probably dependent on that. I don't know. So at this point in time, I'm super confused because the committee likes to move those goalposts, as we know.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're like, we're super concerned about finding the best 4 teams. All right, well, check 24/7 Sports, and then just you just basically remove 90 some teams, 100 some teams out of the FBS from your rankings each week, right? And that's what we're really trying to do here. Use Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio if you want to talk about which teams can actually win, because the games have to matter. I saw Peter Burns tweet something last night where he said, I believe he was like, Texas beat Alabama when Deion Sanders was running college football. Like, why does that matter? This was the same season, and the results have to matter. And Texas beat Alabama at Alabama. So I think the one trump card Texas will have is, to me, you cannot have a 14 playoff with Alabama in it. That does not include Texas.
Right.
It's hard to justify. The math does not work out. And then on the other side of things, too, let's just say that chalk holds Georgia wins. Well, I know Florida State from a television standpoint, and that's what this is. I know FSU from a television standpoint is going to be a huge meh because of the third string. They'll still do well TV-wise, but the matchup is just hard to get behind if it's going to be maybe Tate Rodemaker playing, depending on how bad the injury is. Paul, what's the third stringer's name? I don't even know the kid's name.
Brock Glenn.
Sure.
He was
exactly.
wasn't he committed to Ohio State at one point? Yeah. Okay.
That's a random name generator is what that is. That's that name comes from. So but if they win, to me, if you go 13-0, you're a Power 5 champion with wins against Louisville, the third string, LSU, and on the road against Clemson. I can't keep you out. And so even if it's third string quarterback, I don't care how you assess it. Resume has to matter. That's what you are. You are what your resume says you are, and that's what earning it is, are the wins and losses on your schedule. So Texas probably most likely pass is if Louisville wins, kind of secondary pass, and Alabama gets in, then I'm skeptical about that. And obviously it involves Texas winning too. So I think those are the two ways you could see something happen. But I feel like now the more likely one, it was before, but especially now, is Louisville getting the win.
Josh, of the Dave Aranda 25 minutes or so he gave to us, and thank you for listening and watching that, and obviously important to hear what he has to say. What were a couple of things that stood out to you from what you heard?
So I'm going to go really big picture here. I was thinking about this as I was listening. I don't think we find too many people, you all know it better than I do, that don't like Dave Aranda. I do think at points you could even argue his honesty and how forthright he is and how almost quietly thoughtful he is can work against him at times just because there's more brash, outgoing people. I want Dave Aranda to do well because I like Dave Aranda the person and I believe in what he says, and I actually like the values. I hate being altruistic. I would be a terrible AD, by the way, because I would always go for the values hires. But that kind of gets me to my point. That doesn't always get you. That doesn't really get you wins. I mean, I work in Arkansas, guys. Sam Pittman's a nice guy everybody likes. Guess who they brought back this week because things are not going well? Bobby Petrino. Guess who came back to the SEC last year after leaving in disgrace because he called prostitutes off the school phone? Hugh Freeze, right? Everybody hates Eli Drinkowitz's guts because he's a weird nerd, but guess what? He's a dogged recruiter, and also they won 10 games this season. The good guys in this sport typically do not always win. And that is the one thing about this sport that kind of makes it tough to watch at certain points. I know folks from the Baylor, the Bryles tree make people feel certain ways about that kind of stuff too. Jeff Letty getting hired makes a certain group of people feel a certain type of way. So I think that's kind of my big thought is man, I want the good guy to do well. Dave Aranda doing well was a win for the good guys. This is a loss to the bad guys as he's doing poorly right now. But this is not a sport where good guys always win. And if you can coach, man, you will have a long, long life in this business, much like people like Bobby Petrino, much like people like Hugh Freeze. I don't know if the kind of dog or the schematic expert, kind of type recruiter, motivator type person is in Aranda the way it's in some of those guys. And I think that's good for his personal life, probably. Maybe not good for a football program, which is sad to say.
Josh, Hugh Freeze would like you to know it was escorts. That's I don't know what the delineation is there, but classier.
Yeah, much classier for Hugh. And then obviously you got to go to the Jesus Camp the rehabilitation program at Liberty, and get to do that. Yeah, but I mean, guys like that, he's got a job again, and he almost beat Bama, right? I mean, he's done it before. That's kind of how you get a second life in this business. And so I feel bad for Dave, but I don't know if the attitude, is going to make a 18 to 22-year-old kid stay on campus for him.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Great stuff and insight across the board as always. Fridays at 4, Josh Neighbors from 365 Sports with what he has on his podcast every